It's August 17, 2018. I'm Doug Stevens, and this is Retail Profit. In 2013, amid a maelstrom of disruption in the retail industry, I wrote an article called "The Store is Media." My aim was to highlight what I felt was a dramatically under-editorialized shift taking place in the retail industry. It was my belief then, as it is now, that as digital media in all its various forms marched closer and closer to fulfilling the traditional purpose of physical stores, namely to merchandise assortments of products, convey product information, and enable transactions, that physical stores would in turn transform into a powerful form of media. It would be, in my estimation, a complete reversal of roles. Media would become the store, and the store would become media. In fact, I believed that physical store experiences would eventually prove to be the most powerful form of media that brands have at their disposal. Physical, sensorial, and even emotionally engaged experiences would become, by far, the most effective and measurable channel for brands to genuinely connect with consumers and influence their attitudes and behaviors. But I also believed that this transition would require a fundamental shift in thinking among retailers. The role of a physical store could no longer simply be to transact, but instead to transform, to turn consumers into converts, zealots for the brand, and to do so by giving every customer the only product that really mattered, a powerful, deliberate, and beautifully designed experience. The piece went on to assert that in time, the purpose of physical retail stores would not be to distribute products at all, but rather that the experiences taking place in these stores would themselves become monetizable and potentially comprise an entirely new business model for retail. As you can imagine, this notion of stores as media was met with significant skepticism. After all, the retail industry was still reeling from the hangover brought on by the 2008 recession, and many in the industry were still clinging to the hope that with enough time, things would return to normal. For incumbent retailers with vast sums of capital tied up in physical retail, the intellectual leap required to imagine stores that didn't aim to sell products was challenging, to say the least. And for many in the commercial real estate industry, the notion seemed downright disastrous. Retail stores as media was a hard concept for many to accept. Recently, however, that's changed. There's an awakening taking place. A growing number of brands, retailers, and industry experts are now recognizing this important shift in the marketplace and the transformational role of physical retail experiences as a form of media. With that in mind, I wanted to check back in with the industry to understand how this thinking is evolving and maturing and what it ultimately means for the future of retail. And I knew exactly where to start.
Hello?
Rachel.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Rachel Shechtman is the founder of Story, a New York City-based experiential retailer. In 2011, Rachel made waves in the retail industry when she began partnering with major brands to create unique themed events in her 2,000 square foot 10th Avenue store. As Rachel puts it, Story is a space that has the point of view of a magazine, changes every 4 to 6 weeks like a gallery, but sells things like a store. I've known Rachel since 2012 and recently featured her and Story in my second book, Reinventing Retail, where I laid out a case for how a conventional department store brand like Macy's could stand to benefit tremendously by employing a store-as-media model like Story in their department stores. As it turns out, in 2018, Macy's acquired Story and the creative energy of Rachel Shechtman herself, making her Macy's Brand Experience Officer. So Rachel, you and I have, for the better part of 10 years, both been voices in the wilderness talking about this notion of retail as media or the store as media. What does that mean to you?
So when I think of media, I think about reach, and I think about engagement and brand storytelling. And I think we grew up in an era of media being TV and magazines and evolved into obviously, digital. And when you stop and you look at numbers of where else people spend their time in masses, retail is one of those places. And I can't remember the recent number, but safe to say it's over 80 million people a week go to Starbucks. And so if you look at that, that's not just a customer, it's an audience. And so when I think about media, I think about, how can brands access consumers in new and unexpected places and in meaningful ways? And I think where the retail side of that comes in is how do retailers look to partner and create more dynamic experiences, both as it relates to the customer experience, as well as looking at the business model and economics, and looking at how they can collaborate with brands in new ways. And so I think, that's something that gets me really excited and kind of, let's if media by definition is consuming content, in specific places and platforms, I think retail is a frontier that's barely been tapped or scratched, and is such an exciting opportunity.
And while it is definitely an exciting opportunity, it prompts questions around how to measure success. After all, Rachel's model was unconventional, with much of Story's revenue generated up front by brands eager to pay to be featured in her space, with many coughing up anywhere between $400,000 and $800,000 to take part. So in a retail world dominated by outdated industrial-era metrics like sales per square foot and comparable store growth, how does one begin measuring retail as media?
You have your digital marketing team, right, who has a budget for Google AdWords and for customer acquisition, right? So we're always reading about different people's customer acquisition costs, and they acquire customers based on X dollars, right? Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side, in merchandising, we look at selling product. Okay, what's our gross margin? What's going to be our sell-through percentage? How much money did we make? But what if we actually looked at selling product not just based on an open-to-buy and sell-through percentage, but looking at it as strategic customer acquisition and applying customer acquisition metrics to it, not just sales? I think you're really changing the game and potentially making money to acquire customers instead of spending money to acquire customers.
This notion of using retail not to push products, but instead to pull customers sounds simple in theory, but in practice it requires tremendous skill and creativity. And the reality is, not everyone is Rachel Shechtman. The question I had was, can the store as media concept work at scale? Is it viable across a chain of stores? To find out, I needed to speak to a multi-unit retailer.
Hello, Ethan speaking.
Ethan, Doug Stevens.
Hey, Doug, how's everything?
Things are good. How are you doing? Ethan Song is the co-founder of Frank & Oak, a Canadian-based apparel retailer which, from the beginning, has taken a less than conventional approach to retail. Beginning as an online apparel subscription model for men in 2012, the brand began in 2013 opening physical stores, many of which included elements like cafes and barbershops. They now operate 18 locations. Ethan was recently speaking at a conference where he referred to his stores as media, so I wanted to learn more about what that means at Frank & Oak.
What it really means is that we're shifting away from, stores being basically warehouses and stores being areas where you transact towards stores being a platform for storytelling for your brand. And I think that there's not one formula to that, and that's part of the reason why, people are often, challenged as to what to do. But I definitely think that, to me, it's a way to experience a brand. It's a way to get highly branded and personalized service in a way that you can do online. So I think we see obviously physical in-person side of our business and real life as complementary, and therefore, if we are moving to a world where effectively the moment that you wish you had a certain products, it would appear basically in your office, at your home, really the warehousing part will disappear and the transactional part will basically become seamless, and therefore what is left, and for us what is left is basically what I call media.
But how do you design a store that is media? And how does that design differ from a traditional apparel store design where the primary concern is how much inventory can be stuffed into each and every square foot of space? As a brand that looks at their stores as media channels, how does that influence your approach to the way stores are designed?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I think that typically, if people measure basically, their store productivity or performance based on, sales per square footage or four-wall contribution, I would think that it kind of pushes you to put more stuff on the floor because obviously you have more stuff, you have more sales. Therefore, your sales per square footage will go up. And I think that is not a customer-centric way of thinking about an in-store experience. That is more of an internal, business performance kind of metric. And I think that's not something that will work in this new generation. So the way we think about our stores is, we always want that at least a third of our stores is dedicated to community, whether it's, spaces for conferences, spaces for food and hang out, or even coffee shop in some of our stores. So we always reserve at least a third for that, and then a third for customer service, which means areas where people can interact with real people. We found that in our locations, investing and having more people on the floor, having real human interactions is essential to the experience. So, I would say we staff more than probably the average retailer. We make sure there's actual spaces where that interaction can happen. So that's the way that we think about it. But in terms of actual physical size, like how many square foot, I would say we don't really think in that way. I think we think in terms of is the location unique? Is it driving the story? And then measure the success of that store based on the lifetime value of the customer. So
if retail stores can be viewed as media, physical websites, as it were, it raises the question, what about the data associated with the experiences taking place in those spaces? Each day, in millions of physical stores, massive amounts of data are being generated. If retail is indeed a form of media, then the data those experiences generate must be of inherent value, right? The question is how to unlock that value.
So our business model is totally divorced from sales activity in our locations.
That's Vibhu Norby. In 2015, he, along with partners William Minton and Philip Raub, launched Beta, spelled B8TA. The unique thing about beta stores is that their objective isn't necessarily to sell you anything at all. Instead, the concept was aimed at getting at something infinitely more valuable than the sale of any single product.
We, a couple years ago, felt that the only way to make a business model in the physical world resilient to Amazon and to this direct-to-consumer trend was to monetize the actual customer engagement that happens around products and stores.
What occurred to Norby and his partners was that retail had become fundamentally boring, and ironically, as a direct result of its obsession with product sales. By decoupling the sale from the value of discovering and interacting with cool products, Beta had discovered a new and vibrant model for revenue.
And to do that, we not only changed the model, whereby companies are paying essentially a monthly subscription fee to access space in our stores and the eyeballs that come with that. And in exchange, they receive 100% of the revenue that we do generate from the stores. We also had to change the metrics that are coupled with the store itself. And so typically, a retailer is sort of sharing out inventory and sales data every couple weeks with their vendors. In our world, we're more focused on measuring how customers interact with products, what they do inside the store, and then what they do afterwards as well. To us, that's really the reinvention of retail as more of a media advertising platform than as a typical sales channel.
And it's an approach that appears to work. Today, Beta operates 11 stores and have partnered with Lowe's Home Improvement to create store-in-store concepts across 13 states. And in 2018, Macy's took a stake in the company and has given them space in 10 of their Market at Macy's shops in 9 states, including its flagship Herald Square store in Manhattan. So, if individual retail spaces can create valuable media impressions, and those media impressions inherently generate equally valuable data, what, I wondered, would be possible if hundreds of these spaces were brought together under one roof? What if all that media and data was joined together by a physical network of sorts?
I think what the store as media means to me is that we are competing on as a channel, much like TV, Netflix, HBO, Amazon, any other content provider, and that we as retail purveyors, whether as retailers or retail landlords, have got to provide an experience, entertainment, engagement, human interaction.
That's Mark Toro. Mark is the managing partner of North American Properties, a mixed-use developer based in Atlanta, Georgia. I met Mark several years ago and could tell immediately that he didn't think or speak like a typical developer. In fact, Mark doesn't even view himself or his team as being developers of properties, but rather creators of communities. This sense of community and placemaking lies at the heart of everything Mark builds.
We look at Avalon as a community. It has 6 different uses and brings human energy from different sources at different times of the day, and gives the opportunity for people to convene and to meet in real life and have conversations. The epidemic in America of loneliness and isolation is to a great extent driven by the fact that we spend 10 to 12 hours a day looking at a screen as opposed across a dinner table or on a city street with an individual. And our goal is to create a community that will eventually, essentially as a byproduct, drive commerce in retail.
But what about the economics of shopping centers? I mean, if Story was creating value through media impressions, if Frank and Oak viewed lifetime customer value as more important than four-wall sales, and Beta was monetizing the data of consumer interactions in a physical space, could the economic relationship between commercial landlords and tenants evolve beyond sales per square foot and percent rent? According to Toro, we haven't quite turned that corner.
Sales per square foot is the only gauge that I'm aware of that we can use to drive rent. It would be a beautiful thing if the model could morph into something that assigned and recognized value created in something other than sales done in the store, but that model has yet to be created.
With that said, Mark also agrees that the transition to retail as media, as entertainment, as community, isn't subsiding anytime soon.
This is here to stay, and if anything, it's going to accelerate. So I think new retail formats, and we are just one. There are lots of others. There are urban districts, and there are pure entertainment districts, and there are lots of others that are capturing the dollars of consumers in bricks and mortar retail. But what they have in common is that they are not yesterday's mall. They are trading on human energy just like we are.
And it's my belief that one day, not far from now, the human energy found in physical spaces will be viewed as the most powerful form of media brands can harness. Their ability to create enchanting spaces that inspire, connect, and transform customers into zealous converts for brands will prove infinitely more manageable, measurable, and valuable than any form of advertising could ever hope to be. And it's thanks to pioneering entrepreneurs like Rachel Shechtman, Ethan Song, Vibhu Norby, and Mark Toro that retail is truly being re-engineered for a new and brighter era. You've been listening to Retail Profit. For more on this and other trends, visit our website at retailprofit.com and follow us on Twitter at retailprofit.